Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Thursday morning. It is June 5th. Appreciate you taking the time to follow the weather with us. I'm going to start today in the Eastern Pacific, particularly the tropics, because I think that has relevance to our forecast, even out into next week. Not directly impacting those of us in the United States, and probably not even Mexico, frankly, in terms of the actual tropical storm force winds and the torrential rainfall, but how it might shape our jet stream and which areas receive precipitation. I've been talking about this quite a bit this week already. We're looking at the Eastern Pacific. We can see some bubbling thunderstorms. These are tropical thunderstorms. We're well south, even of Mexico here, west of the Central America, the Panama Isthmus. And we can see kind of broad tropical thunderstorm development here, but nothing with a sort of coherent circulation. If I just let's pull my brush up here. If you just look at these thunderstorms, they're over a wide area. If I asked you to try to find an area of a center of circulation, it would be hard to do that. And that tells me that while there's enough thunderstorms here to be watchful, there's nothing imminently developing. Now, the National Hurricane Center has put out a high chance of development here over the next 7 days. Now, 7 days is critical here, not in the next 48 hours or even 3 or 4 days, but a continued chance, 80%, that's pretty strong, that this system will, in fact, spin up here and make its way toward the northwest before forming some sort of tropical system, either tropical storm, potentially hurricane, before moving to the west. And it's that track to the west that's relevant to our forecast next week. I'm going to show you that in a second here. Before I do that, I'm going to jump over. This is the ECMWF 850 millibar height and vorticity plot, and I show that because it quickly shows us areas of that coherent spin in the atmosphere from the forecast from the European model here. I'm going to make this valid. Let's do the recording of this video. It's about 5 a.m. Central Time. Play this forward. And we can see here's what we just saw on satellite. So kind of a broad area of rotation here with those thunderstorms, maybe a few kind of isolated spin-ups underneath some of those stronger thunderstorms, but no obvious, deep low pressure system here that we'd say, hey, that's a tropical storm. If I take this forecast through this evening and then tomorrow morning, same time, so 24 hours out, well, now we have something of a defined circulation here. In fact, we almost have two now bubbling further to the west than where those thunderstorms were today. I take those same forecast into Saturday morning. So now 48 hours out. All right, this is getting even more close and wrapped up. We also have, again, this other kind of piece to it here, much further away. And then now by Sunday morning, well, it looks like we are on the cusp of either a tropical storm here, and if we believe the specific run from the European model, maybe almost two, and it'd be interesting to see how those would interact. If I play this forward, you can see them forming. Those are definitely tropical storms. And then they start to kind of what we call Fujiwara, and that is they spin around and orbit one another before weakening and heading west as a remnant low. And that's all the way out next week on Saturday. This is June 14th. We've been talking about mid-June, the potential of increased development in the tropics. And we see, potentially even another storm that far out. Now, that's just one solution from the ECMWF. We'll see if, we see two tropical storm systems spin around one another. I'll be the first to play that loop, 100 times for you all. But regardless, not impacting them, maybe getting close enough to Mexico to bring some tropical rainfall into the area. Again, National Hurricane Center is going to be following that. But what I want to focus on that for our weather is the ridge that's going to be associated with that storm. I often say, show me a hurricane, show me a ridge. Often there's either a ridge critically steering it or helping to form as a result of it. So I'm going to play this forecast forward. This is the same ECMWF forecast, 500 millibar heights. We're looking further north over North America, critically where the trough and ridge pattern is setting up, both here this weekend and next week, and how it might change with those one, maybe two storms forming in the Eastern Pacific. So I'm going to take this forecast quickly to the weekend. We'll talk about all the details of this as it, concerns where we're seeing storms here over America in just a few slides. What I'm waiting for is by Sunday, right, we had those storms developing. Again, they're just off screen here. But what we see is the subtropical ridge over Mexico. And I want to play this forecast through the next week, because if you remember, it took that whole week to move them that far across the Pacific. And keep an eye on this tropical ridge, because as I play this forward, this is Tuesday, June 10th, Wednesday, June 11th, and then Friday, June 13th. Look at that subtropical ridge. At the beginning of this forecast, it was here over central Mexico. 6-7 days later, we're all the way here near Hawaii, almost, influencing the weather of Hawaii a week out. And what this has done critically for, the continental U.S., for the Canadian prairie, it has removed the ridging here, and it's allowed weakness in the flow. And this trough that was up here by Alaska says, that's good enough for me, and it slides right down here. And this is going to impact our weather at the end of next week. It's going to bring renewed precipitation chances to the Canadian Prairie. It's going to be a broad area of potential precipitation and storm chances to the central U.S. We'll take a look at that near kind of the middle part of this video. And even this week low, ushering this ridge this far over, has this big of an impact on our weather. It's just really neat to see this kind of all come together here. I'm going to play this forecast a little bit forward. This is, again, just one run. The details aren't totally clear, but I'm going to end it here. This is 10 days out. Again, reiterating that this is not an exact forecast at this point. But there is a bit of a change here from the view I'm looking at now to what we started with. And I just want to point this out. One, see this kind of broad ridge over Canada here? We do have this trough off the Canadian Maritimes, this kind of trough underneath it. But this is a much more kind of blocked up pattern with broad ridging near the Arctic, low sneaking beneath it, versus I'm going to take this forecast back here where we have trough over Alaska, ridge over British Columbia, trough over the continental US, ridge over the Canadian Maritimes, little subtropical low here. This is a much more, progressive flow than what we just saw the model work its way into 10 days out. So this is going to be something to watch as we go through kind of mid-June. Potentially, I talked about a pattern change maybe a week and a half ago where we were going to quickly move some systems through trough ridge. That tends to be good for getting your typical average-like weather where you're warm for a few days, cool for a few days, you're wet for a few days, you're dry for a few days, right? That's pretty favorable weather in terms of being seasonally average for growing a crop or just kind of enjoying the summer. What we don't want to see is us get stuck in the same pattern, which we can often do when we're blocked up, like we see kind of at the end of that ECMWF. And another way, I think you can just look at this globally. There's a lot going on this map. This is the same 500 millibar trough ridge map, but we're looking, a full globe picture here and the projection. I'm starting the video or the forecast now, again, about the recording of this video. We see trough over Alaska, ridge over Western Canada, trough over the central U.S., ridge over the Canadian Maritimes, and you can actually kind of continue that daisy chain, if you will. Trough here over Europe, ridge over Eastern Europe and Russia, weak troughing here over Central Asia, ridging over Siberia, trough here. It's just this kind of nice trough ridge. We're moving things through. You're going to be warm for a few days, you're going to be cool for a few days. And that forecast probably holds true in Denver, Colorado, as it does all the way over in China or Ukraine, wherever. But if I take this forecast out, and again, maybe I'll stop it. Let's do just a week from now. We can still see it kind of weekly, ridge, trough, ridge, trough, ridge, trough, ridge, trough. It's still kind of there, but if we take it a little bit further out, now we see broad ridge, trough underneath it. Don't like that look. We do see a kind of a nice trough there, but again, a broad ridge over the Arctic here north of Europe and West Asia, and then a trough underneath that, and then kind of some meandering troughs here over East Asia. So as we take this forecast further out, we see more kind of symptoms of maybe a blocked up atmosphere. And that's consistent, unfortunately, with what we see from a little bit of what's going on in the West Pacific. So we've shown a plot like this before. Again, this is a Havmuller diagram. We're focused on this area in the West Pacific because it tends to produce the convection and ascent in the atmosphere to help that daisy chain power along, either through North America or even beyond. And over the last kind of week or two, it's been stronger. In fact, it's strong right now, which makes sense because I just showed you the forecast as it begins today at the recording of this video, and we had that nice progressive pattern all the way across the globe. Now, we're seeing this movement either from a Kelvin wave or the MJO heading over towards Central America. We're expecting mid-June tropical development as a result of that, but all the while, the West Pacific is starting to lose that ascent and that drive for momentum across the globe. So not a surprise necessarily when I see this to then look back at that 10-day forecast from the ECMWF and see that lack of momentum. And I think it's partially because of that, if not more majority because of that, that we're seeing out in the long-range forecast June 14th from the 19th, this from the ECMWF ensemble of widespread warmth over North America. Now, it's not necessarily widespread dry right now. We're still kind of in early June. We can get some of these systems to come underneath. We've seen that already this year, but it's something to keep an eye on going forward, that at least kind of mid to late June, losing some momentum in the atmosphere, the chances for ridging, I would say, over North America increase. Some heat getting back over some of these areas, not a bad thing where we're running GDP deficits in this area. I'll talk about that at the end of this video. But that chance is there that we're talking about a more widespread ridge event in mid to late June. I want to jump over and look at the Atlantic. I talked about the Eastern Pacific here. Atlantic is quiet. The National Hurricane Center I mentioned yesterday morning was eyeing some thunderstorms as they were moving toward the northeast over the Carolinas. Those are bringing rain to that area now. We'll take a look at that in a second. But they have dropped the chance for tropical development. It was low to begin with, near 10%, so not surprised to see that. The rest of the Atlantic Basin, quiet here in early June, not unexpected at the start of the hurricane season. We typically don't see much activity. What we are seeing come off Africa are not tropical waves. It's actually really been Saharan dust from the desert here over the Sahara. We actually have some of this over Florida now. It's not easy to see underneath some of the clouds here. But if you look here over the far eastern Atlantic, you'll notice see these kind of bubbling clouds underneath here, just kind of typical weak tropical convection. But you can almost kind of draw a line here. And I know it'll be hard to see when the video processes, but you'll notice kind of a difference between what you see here and what's in this pocket here. And what's in this pocket is Saharan dust. So this is a product from NOAA, I should say NASA here, to detect this. Where you can see all that dust. Some of this from an earlier plume lingering over Florida today. So Florida has had smoke in the upper atmosphere, which has turned to the sun red during the sunsets, and now it has Saharan air layer down low, reducing visibility. So kind of having a double whammy of just poor air quality, unfortunately for the state. And it appears more Saharan dust is on its way across the Atlantic. Too early to say if it's going to get back into Miami or St. Petersburg, but nonetheless can see that there. And this typically quashes hurricane development, but it's so early in the season, I don't think it's too relevant yet. You can see this picture here again from NASA of the Cabo Verde Islands, and makes that dust clear. This is just a true color image. Don't need any sort of satellite detection to tell you what is happening here. That dust is being blown right off the deserts of the Sahara over the Atlantic Ocean. I will say, if I go back, I can take this out into a forecast here, and we can see that dust move across. This is the weekend out into Monday and then Tuesday. So fortunately not seeing it, at least from this forecast, get back up into Florida in high concentrations. But whenever I see these big trade wind surges, because that's really what this is, we're moving the trade winds from the east to the west, right? Called them the trade winds because the European discoverers, right, they flowed right along these in their sailboats to get over to the West Indies and North America at times. But those big trade wind surges across the Atlantic tell me at times, particularly in the Pacific, but sometimes in the Atlantic, that the atmosphere might be losing a little bit of momentum. And that also lines up with what we just talked about right at the beginning of this video. And we can actually look at this kind of a different way. This is Earth relative momentum by latitude. And so this plot is a little awkward to read, but essentially here's the South Pole, here's the North Pole, here's where we are, right? About 30 to 60 degrees, whether in the US, South US up into Canada. And what we've seen is that at the subtropics, that is between 10 and 30, even to 40 degrees latitude, you can think all of Mexico up into the southern United States, we're lacking momentum. In fact, the Cabo Verde Islands I just mentioned are about 15. So you can see that the trade winds are negative anomalies here. So we see that lack of momentum, and we don't really bring it back up until about 50 or 60 degrees latitude. That's well up into Canada. So when we show you the jet stream, you'll notice it's weak, across parts of North America. It's stronger to the north. We've been lucky at times. We've had these kind of cutoff lows sneak through portions of the southern U.S. That's brought rain. In some cases, it's brought too much rain, but it has been our ability to produce rainfall during this setup, at least just having these cutoff lows. Because right now, this jet stream, you can see it's strongest up here. It's up over Canada. At times, it's come into the U.S., but we've been reliant on either cutoff lows or right now the subtropical jet stream moving over Texas here to bring rainfall to this area. Again, times it's been too much, but areas to the north are lacking because that jet stream has been up here. We've seen this lack of momentum. The result of that, if we just look at the last 30 days of precipitation, right, drier over the Midwest, too wet over portions of the Mid-South. You'll have to ignore some of the masking here going on in the West. This is due to just zero rainfall recorded at all. We'll have to take care of that. But again, this area here has been lacking because the jet stream has either been here and the polar branch of it, or it's been down here, the subtropical branch of it, or some of these cutoff flows that have just been lingering over this area. Fortunately, we've got some recently here into Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota, but parts of the Midwest still running below average this time of year. Now, the good news is just over the last 24 hours, due to some showers, we'll talk about these in a moment, that have come through. We actually saw some storms associated with this. I believe an observed tornado yet again in the St. Louis metro area. Haven't looked at any sort of damage survey yet, but saw a tornado warning. They said a tornado was observed, pretty clear radar couplet there yesterday afternoon. And just, gosh, the St. Louis metro area, it's just been relentless this year with tornadoes, unfortunately. Again, those kind of lingering showers and thunderstorms that the National Hurricane Center was watching, we can see that activity here over Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas. Some thunderstorm activity in the panhandle of Texas continued yesterday with some significant severe reports. I'm going to jump over and show you the current radar image as of this morning. You can see those showers lingering here across the Midwest, expecting additional thunderstorm development along this kind of lingering front today, potentially all the way up into Maine. Additional showers here over the Carolinas, and kind of waiting tonight to see what sort of severe thunderstorm development will reoccur over the high plains. I'm also watching this area of showers here, which is going to continue meandering up through portions of Nebraska into South Dakota and Minnesota today as well. We'll look at that in the forecast. Not terribly too much precipitation coming out of these, but it's measurable, and it's moving through an area that was drier earlier this year, hoping it gets all the way up into part of the woods here in Minnesota where we saw those wildfires. They're needing some rainfall as well. If we get the 500 millibar jet, this is just below, your typical proper jet stream here. But what it does identify, I think, pretty well is that here's the polar jet stream. Again, well up here into Canada, we're talking, Hudson Bay and east, or northern British Columbia. And we've been relying on this just kind of weak flow coming over North America to bring our rainfall chances. And that's continuing this week. Underneath this week trough, as we'd expect, some cooler temperatures here this morning. Just jumping over and looking at those current temps. Cooler over Montana, Wyoming, portions of the Continental Divide. Warmer outside the influence of that. And then as you get closer to that subtropical ridge over Texas, see those temperatures quite a bit higher here. All hazards map here this morning, pretty quiet. Not too much to talk about. The gray that you can see over Iowa, parts of Wisconsin, even eastern Nebraska here, that is air quality alerts, again, from that smoke that has come out of Canada, unfortunately. This gray here, if you can tell, is slightly different. We're also seeing some fog reports this morning near I-80 in northwestern Illinois. Flood watches and advisories in portions of the Mid-South, Oklahoma, over into the southern plains here due to some of the recent rainfall, and some more on the way this evening. We do have that flow moving north of Texas. I showed you that broad flow moving around that subtropical ridge here over Mexico. And that's coming over dew points that have been increasing here over the last few days. So if you look at this flow here, this is at the surface, and what's contoured in the colors here are dew points. And this orange color are dew points getting up over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you kind of look at this map, I'll notice two areas where those dew points are surging in to the U.S. One is here over the Carolinas. We're expecting more precipitation today. And one is here, all the way over to West Texas, even the southern high plains here. You can see those dew points just racing up into here. And so my eye immediately says, hey, we might have some thunderstorm development here, almost over into New Mexico. And so when I show you this day one outlook from the Storm Prediction Center, I'll zoom that in. Not a surprise to see that slight risk pulled all the way back toward the Continental Divide here in southeastern New Mexico, much of West Texas here and into Oklahoma, southwest Kansas, southeastern Colorado. Really this threat more overnight tonight, which we'll look at in a moment. With that widespread moisture across the southeast, that flow blowing over the top of it, remember I just showed that. We have that flow coming over the top, and that's actually going to be strengthening in the next few days. Storm Prediction Center highlighting a wide area of slight risk tomorrow on Friday. Kind of looks like a fish, and not responsible for the exact fish shape, but we see that broader thunderstorm risk tomorrow, even again extending all the way up on that lingering front up into New England on day 3. Again, just continues, again, kind of looks like a fish, and that continues into the southeast portions of the Carolinas, all the way across the Mid-South and into portions of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia on, this would be Saturday now, and then even Sunday, right, with that flow coming over the top. Continue West Texas, just broken record, and then the Carolinas into eastern Georgia as well. There's potentially additional severe weather on Saturday for that area here. Again, just to make this a little bit more clear, I'm going to show you, this is the 300 millibar wind speed. So looking up at the proper jet stream now, let's make this valid. It's about 7 a.m. this morning Central Time. There's that flow underneath. Here's the polar jet stream well up here. But the subtropical jet stream has allowed us to continue these rainfall events in the south, and these have at time worked up just recently into the Midwest, which is how we've gotten some of our recent rainfall. But it's this flow coming over the top of those 70-degree dew points, which is prompting this severe weather concern. If we take this into tomorrow afternoon, the flow again cranking over this area, not a surprise to see that wider slight risk over that area here. Could be upgraded, and then into, let's do Friday afternoon. You'll notice this area, again, just kind of expanding here. Tomorrow, let's go all the way into Saturday afternoon, and you'll see that jet stream now starting to get into the southeast over portions of the Mid-South, and that Storm Prediction Center slight risk area just kind of following it along with it. Here's our next weather maker for the Midwest. This is a trough coming out of Canada here. A ridge is building up to the west. This subtropical ridge is starting to get the feel of that developing system now on Saturday. I'm going to take this forecast forward because even by Monday, this is now June 9th, this trough situated over the Midwest here, bringing temperatures down across the Midwest. Some lingering showers will be spinning around this upper level low here. We'll have to look at those in a moment. That subtropical ridge is now exiting to the west along that right? Potential tropical storm, maybe even weakening at this point on Monday. Seeing ridging over the western U.S. That trough starts to move out on Wednesday. And then remember, we talked about potential troughing getting back into the western U.S. as a result of that system making its way west in the Pacific, allowing this weakness in the flow. Now some southwest flow off the continental divide, maybe some rainfall in this area here. This is all the way out to next week. So I've kind of segued this conversation into the long range. Before I do that, I do want to show you the 3-kilometer NAM forecast for the next kind of 60 hours. This takes us into Saturday. I'm going to take this forecast to Thursday afternoon because we just have those lingering showers that we talked about this morning. But by 5 p.m., those showers extend up into South Dakota, even potentially parts of Nebraska here into western Minnesota. Again, renewed development along that lingering front here, all the way from New England into portions of the eastern Corn Belt, Ohio as well. This is 5 p.m. Not expecting widespread severe from this, but can't rule out a few wind and hail reports. Really expecting more significant severe weather further back toward the west, where we saw those dew points surging in. Take this into tonight, now 9 p.m. Thursday. This is Central Time. Can see, proper significant severe thunderstorm development, large hail, wind reports. Can't rule out tornadoes here, all the way over into the panhandle of Oklahoma, southwestern Kansas, southeastern Colorado, west of Amarillo and Lubbock, and then well down near the Big Bend area of Texas. This could evolve into a wind threat overnight into portions of central Oklahoma. This is now 6 a.m. Friday morning. So that squall line moving all the way through the state overnight, likely leaving some sort of remnant, maybe MCV or MCS over Missouri Friday morning. And that could be an area for renewed storm development into Friday evening over portions of the Mid-South, the Middle Mississippi River Valley, and then extending those storms back to the west. Again, this is Friday evening. Have to watch this area of Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, southeastern Missouri. But even seeing late Friday renewed development along that same area, in western Oklahoma. And yet potentially, again, this is one forecast run, but another squall line taking us through the night Friday into early Saturday morning with systems, again, that Storm Prediction Center risk moving over into the southeast on Saturday. I'll show that in just a second there. That's where that forecast ends. I'm going to jump over and show you the ECMWF here. This forecast valid as of this morning. I'm going to play it quickly through the next few days because we just looked at those. There's those showers that just shot through the northern plains. We see that squall line risk overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning. Renewed severe thunderstorm development possible on Friday, again over portions of the Mid-South and then back over the high plains. And then again, the showers and storms lingering along that front through the Mid-Atlantic into New England. Let's play this forecast forward. We'll take it into Saturday afternoon. I am curious. We are seeing this kind of in-between development. What I mean by that is we have this trough here over Canada. We're expecting showers to be spinning around that, expecting the severe weather over this kind of wide area. Remember, we talked about that on Saturday. But some of the models here, the NAM included, and now the ECMWF have brought some showers, storms, and precipitation up into the I-states here, Iowa, Illinois, and some areas that need some precipitation out of this. And I'll be watching those closely because as I take this into next week, outside of this trough here, this is now Tuesday, June 10th. We're looking at a dry spell next work week for areas, again, outside the Gulf Coast states. Now, by Wednesday, we're expecting that trough to start making its presence felt over the northwest, starting to get rainfall back up into the prairie here. The Golden Triangle, Montana, we can see by Thursday increasing precipitation chances up into Canada, even the northern plains at this point. This is Thursday evening, continuing to see precipitation across the southeast all the while next week. And then by Friday, potentially getting better precipitation chances over portions of the Midwest, Canadian Prairie included in that. And that potentially continues Saturday as well. Wide area of chances here. The details on this are not clear now, 10 days out, but the definite chances for increased rainfall are there. Take this ECMWF forecast out. I'm going to do this quickly. We talked about the southeast and the mid-south severe weather chances. Not a surprise to see some high rainfall values there. We'll have to watch with those repeated squall lines over Oklahoma. Definitely for some potential flooding threat. But I am watching closely on Saturday. I'm going to play this forecast. I'm watching this corridor here from the ECMWF. Because on Saturday, we did see it try to bring some showers through that area. We'll see it kind of missing an area here in eastern Iowa, northwest Illinois. We are seeing some measurable precipitation up into here in portions of Illinois as a result of that. If I play the forecast forward, you'll notice at the end of next week, those chances increase quickly. Again, for the central United States, the details on this aren't clear, but if I play that back and forth, Canadian Prairie included at least over into Alberta, parts of southern Saskatchewan. Next week, see increased precipitation chances. Another way we can kind of look at this, I'll play this. This is the ECMWF ensemble, the probability of getting less than half an inch. And I'll play this out in the forecast. We're all the way out into next week here. Most places likely to get well over half an inch by this point. But if I take this even a week out, let's do Thursday. You'll notice this area here, again, eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northwest Illinois, even stretching up into the Canadian Prairie by Thursday. Better than average chances. Let's just call it a coin flip. A worse than coin flip chance here that we're not going to be receiving at least a half an inch over portions of the Midwest and then stretching up into the Prairie. Now, when that next system comes through, that troughing, see how quickly those chances fall, thankfully, which is a bullish chance, right, for precipitation, but still lingering here into the 30 to 40% over an area here that needs some rainfall. So watching these areas closely for precipitation at the end of next week. There's a chance that, again, this ends up on the lower side, and that's only going to become an increasing concern through summer. I'm going to sound like a broken record at this point, but there's some areas here where we're lacking in rainfall just over the last kind of 30 to 60 days. We're seeing that in the soil moisture. I've called it the kind of I-80 dry spell, if you will. Thankfully, the kind of western half of it has gotten some rain recently, but even this area here, I'm still rooting for more precipitation going into the hottest months of June and July. Speaking of that warmth, I want to look at those temperatures quickly, particularly the northwest here. I'm going to take this forecast quickly into Saturday and Sunday because as that potential system develops and we see some of the ridging move west, we're seeing temperatures pick up in a big way in the northwest, a brief heat wave over Washington, Idaho, Boise, Oregon, even into portions of California. Take this into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We see, fortunately, that heat moderating a bit, but starting to push east across portions of the northern plains, even some getting over into the upper Midwest here. But really cooler all the while over the east. While I played that forecast out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, much cooler temperatures here over the central part of the country, extending down into the southeast as well. And that continues early next week before we finally getting some warmth to kind of roll over the continental divide and get out into the widespread central and eastern U.S. I'm going to pick on Muncie, Indiana quickly here near the end of this video. I'm showing you year-to-date temperature averages, and this is per day. This goes all the way back to January 1st. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole temperature story this year, but we have noticed kind of a cold spell at the beginning and then this cold spell in May. And remember, in the Corn Belt, crop was planted, in this stretch here, depending on when exactly they got in, and it has emerged into some cooler temperatures, and we're seeing these GDD deficits pick up now since that planting date. We had some warmth here recently, but with that trough coming in, we're back on the cold side of that. So if I could play this forecast forward, undoubtedly it's going to look something like this before we warm up next week. So those GDD deficits are only going to grow over the next 7 days. Again, just picking on Muncie, but we planted around here. This is a GDD accumulation chart for central Indiana, but this might as well be parts of Illinois, even Iowa, Minnesota, portions of Wisconsin. I could even take you down into Kentucky and show you the same phenomenon where we were running average GDDs all the way through plant until the crop emerged, and this black line is now south of the white line on this chart, which is those average GDD accumulations. Now, historically, in terms of impacting the crop, if we get warm, it tends to be a non-story. We forget about it quickly, and we go up into a bumper crop if we get the heat later in June. But if we go from something like this, a cool June, and then we add stresses to the crop later, we're worried about accumulating a rougher story for the crop that goes up. So right now, it's still a story, and with some of the heat in late June, I'm not necessarily rooting against it as long as we maintain some relevant or regular precipitation chances. While I'm picking on different states here, let's do Quincy, Washington, and the central Washington state here, again, kind of east of the Cascades, well west of Spokane, right in the middle of Washington state. And we see those temperatures ramp up quickly through the weekend. This is all the way out to Sunday and Monday. ECMWF going high temperature forecast of 95 degrees Fahrenheit. These model temperatures often don't hit that actual maximum during the day that these areas can reach. So wouldn't be surprised if we clip 100 degrees Fahrenheit in portions of central Washington through the weekend and early next week. But boy, look at the temperature swing. As that subtropical ridge makes its way west toward Hawaii, right? What we were seeing, play this, let's do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is the ECMWF AIFS forecast. By Sunday, that ridge parked right over Quincy, Washington. But watch as I play that forecast forward. Wednesday, Thursday, man, that now is replaced by a trough late next week. So temperatures swinging in a big way in the northwest next week, maybe even getting some precipitation chances in here into the interior west late next week. If we look at the 8 to 14 day precipitation anomalies from the ECMWF ENS, again, seeing widespread precipitation chances pick up next week with that trough here at the end of the week across the northwest, bringing better precip chances. Again, this is an area or a time of the year where this can happen, and some of these areas are drier here. The chances for precipitation across the Midwest, the Northern Plains, a little bit more uncertain. I think better than not that next weekend we see widespread precipitation here. To say this is exactly how it's going to work out, that this area, Iowa, southern Wisconsin, is going to miss out, isn't the case. Really, this whole area in here has some uncertainty, but we'll see which areas miss out and which do get some precip. We're also seeing something, I won't go too much into this because I'm kind of at time here today, but a Central American gyre spinning up here over portions of Mexico, kind of the middle of June, and that can increase precipitation chances over southeast Texas, which is why we're seeing that kind of higher precipitation value over eastern Mexico, southeast Texas, maybe even getting into the southeast through mid-June. If I take this forecast from the ECMWF ensemble out much further, so there's that trough we were talking about at the end of next week, bringing that temperature swing to Washington and the Northwest, bringing those precipitation chances to the prairie and parts of the Midwest. But if I take the forecast even beyond that, well out into mid-June, this is now June 19th, we've seen the models kind of snapping back toward that subtropical ridge over Texas and trying to grow that up into the Midwest or the Central Plains. In this scenario, I don't like as much because while we had a lack of momentum earlier this year, that jet stream was well up here into Canada, we had little cutoff lows sneaking through this area, and that brought precipitation chances through here. Again, there were too many at times. We saw severe threats, unfortunately, with some of those, but it left rainfall moving through an area where we were trying to get a crop going. And if this ridge develops this way, I don't see the chance for those cutoff lows. This ridge is going to say no to those and keep rainfall out of this area and bring more proper heat and dry weather into the central part of the country, which could emanate out in a more proper summer-like, D-word fashion. Now, that's not a firm forecast at this point. This forecast is well out into, the latter part of June, but it is a scenario that we've seen played out from the ECMWF extended model. This is a 7-day rolling precip anomaly. I'm taking you through about June 18th through the 24th and can see a little bit of consistency, unfortunately, there with the extended forecast from what we just saw from the ENS. If we take the forecast out further into July, right, we see that same signal pop up, over a similar geography. So the concern exists. I mentioned, in the video yesterday about how we'll be watching where the MJO sets up. The ECMWF extended forecast has it renewed development over phases 2 and 3 in mid-July. And we're rooting against this because we noticed historically with some analogs that when we saw ascent, see the green colors here over East Africa or the Indian Ocean, those tended to line up with some of our hotter and drier Julys here. This forecast is, well out beyond a month now. This is not gospel. It is just something to keep an eye on, and we'll have to look at that MJO forecast closer. It's the chance for this existing right now. It's worth mentioning, right, because it's in the forecast, but it is not firm right now. There's more things that we'll have to look at. Eric will talk with you through some of that tomorrow. Thanks for listening today through the end of the video, and I'll talk to you again next week.